Okay, thank you. We'll start our meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Calling the meeting to order of the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee. This is the meeting for Tuesday, January the 6th. And as always, we'll start our meeting with the review of the minutes from the December 2nd, 2025 meeting. If you've had an opportunity to review, I'll take a motion and a second, please. Motion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, same. And the motion passes. Okay, just for our visitors' sake, this committee is reviewing possible projects to present the council in the future for a future bond package. Bond proposal. I encourage y'all to follow the process and ensure that once we get to that point that you make your comments known to the council. This is a preventive street project, and all we're doing is reviewing possible streets for consideration, and we'll just make a recommendation. Any other comments, Paulette?
This committee won't make any final decisions other than recommendations to make to the city council for a future bond election. And I think several of you talked to some of our public works staff before the meeting started, and they talked about the streets that are on the list that this committee is discussing tonight and why those are on the list, and that we have other programs to address streets like Frankie B and other streets. And so anyway, we invite and welcome anybody to come and follow the process. Most of the time we're begging people to come to meetings. But I just wanted you to be aware it's not final decisions being made tonight at all. Even this committee won't reach their final recommendations until probably either March or April. So we're just going through a process of discussing it. And then we would plan to present the recommendation to the city council probably in June.
Okay, thank you, Paulette. Our next item on the agenda is overview of proposed final major and local street rankings for the 2026 Bond Roadway Project. And we turn to Bo Blankenship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, committee members and guests. So welcome back, everyone. We have taken a little bit of a break, but if everyone remembers, before we left off last time, there was quite a bit of work to do between.
And before we start it, if anybody wants to make any comments during the public comment section, you'll need to fill out a card if you'll see our recording secretary. Thank you. Sorry.
Test. Okay, yeah. Green light means go. Okay, let me start over here. So welcome back, everyone. We left off in December with quite a bit of work to do between now and between then and now. And happy to report that we do have, quite a bit of that work done. Excited to present tonight a ranked list. And that leads me to the handouts that are now in front of you. We have both the ranked and residential and local street listing, as well as a map of each that is now in front of you. So as we move through the presentation tonight, you'll be able to use those as a reference because the presentation just doesn't allow sometimes for all of that information to be on the screen. So we'll be moving through the presentation using that information as well as some others. So kind of the agenda tonight for my presentation, want to talk about what our goal is. And so at the end of the meeting, just want to kind of propose the question and have some discussions on, does this committee agree with the ranking process? Does this committee agree with the list that is presented as far as the ranking and how in the methodologies / philosophy on how we got there? But before we get into that new information or that new data, I do want to talk a little bit about some follow-up items that we discussed and kind of action items from last time. One of those was sensitivity analysis. We wanted to look at our decision-making process and matrix and decide whether it was too heavily factored or weighted on one or two of the factors or categories. So Nathan's gonna come up in a minute. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, the committee was presented and handed out a rank or a major list, a major street list, as well as a local street list that were underneath the criterion, which was less than 60 OCI and less than 40 OCI. However, that was a mistake on my part because what I understood the committee to actually want was a full street list of the entire city, not necessarily streets that were part of this program. So, and as you can imagine, that list is quite extensive, and to save a little bit of paper, we did not print one for everyone, but one will be emailed to each of your email accounts. I talked to Christy today. A PDF version of that list will be presented to you via email, electronically. However, if anyone would like a hard copy, please let me know and we'll make sure that that happens. So, and then we'll talk a little bit, I want to get everyone caught up, so we'll do a little meeting summary. I want to talk a little bit about the staff street inspection, get into the rank list, next steps, and then some discussion categories. And I just kind of went through I got ahead of my presentation a little bit, but the entire street network alphabetically, with all of their specifics, with each individual street segment, the location of the street, the PCI designation, and the OCI will all be presented via email. Should be it's either there already or it will be in the morning, so we'll have that fairly quickly. Next on the agenda, I'm going to ask Nathan Froman, City Engineer, to come up, and we're going to talk a little bit about on the follow-up items that we talked about on the sensitivity analysis, where we started and kind of where we're at now.
All right, good evening. So as Bo mentioned, I'm Nathan Froman. I'm the city engineer, longtime Razorback fan, so don't hold it against me. So yeah, like you mentioned at our last meeting, we had ranked our streets based off of what we call the base model. It's just how we ranked each of the categories, the weighted categories, and this was based off of how we did the 2020 bond program. So we kind of just took 2020 and attributed it to the 2026 program. One of the questions that came out of the committee was, well, how sensitive is that model? Have you tried different numbers? Have you played with it? And so Bo let me go, and I got to play with Excel very long, which is what I love to do. So I ended up running about 10 different models, various different ways to test the sensitivity, changing categories, changing factors, changing weights. And so what we did, I ran 10 different models for majors, 10 different for residentials. The models included all the same factors that we had talked in the previous meetings, but they were heavily on condition and traffic volume. Those are some of the items we see as very high priority. There was some equal weight scenarios where we checked if each category had an equal weight. How did that look? And then we did some variations of the original base model, just kind of up and down by 10 points either way, just to see how it went. What I will say is, as you can imagine, there is no single perfect model to run. There's countless numbers of different variations you can run that would take forever. So we got together, thought of the 10 best that made sense, and kind of ran it with that. So here what this shows is, this is not a cherry-picked list. This is just, I didn't want to overwhelm the slide, so I just picked 7 from the majors, 7 from the residentials. And once those 10 models were run, what we did was we averaged it out, kind of what their average ranking was for each one. We checked the rank stability, which if anybody likes math, it has to do with standard deviation. So, and then we looked at how often a street within each different model would fall in the worst 25%. and see we just wanted to see, is there any connectivity between all 10 models? And so what this shows here is just from 7 different examples. You can see on the right side of each table, the models in bottom of 25%, it shows, for Booth Callaway, out of 10 models, it was below, at the bottom 25% for 9 of them. So what this shows is the model we had was consistent, same streets continued to rise to the bottom or rise to the top, I guess however you say it. So that's why we ended up we stayed with the base model, and this kind of exercise just proved that our base model was efficient and did what it was needed to do. If anybody has any questions on the models and wants to be bored with Excel, I would love to show you guys. So I don't have it with me, but I'll show you sometime.
Well, he'll be here all night if anyone does have any questions.
And later.
Okay, well, it looks like there is a little bit of, I've got an error going on here with this slide, but I wanted to recap. So we started this talking about streets within this committee in November. We had one meeting in November, one meeting in December, and here we are kicking off 2026, talking about streets. So wanted to kind of go back just to give everyone a recap in case you were here. You maybe have missed a meeting, or it's been a long time. We've slept a couple times since then. But we started talking about the overall OCI, which was basically created from a 2023 pavement assessment that was performed. Then we talked a little bit about the maintenance versus reconstruction focus, and so there was a chart that we created that had 207 miles worth of maintenance obligations and another 46 or so that was based on potential reconstruction candidates. We went through major and local street evaluation factors and their associated weights for each. We had several discussions about each of those. And then we started talking last meeting about what our total options are to our total outcomes. And I'll show that slide again, which I think is important because it basically is the philosophy that we started with using OCI initially. Let's get our target candidacy streets by using only the OCI. And then at that point, we were going to plug in data for the trimmed street list that OCI helped us with to allow us get to decision matrix that then yields the ranked list that we have tonight. So just a quick little catch up for everyone, and then move on through how we're going to get to the ranked list. So last meeting, we provided the overall the streets that were candidacy, whether they were local or major streets. As you can see, this committee, or the folks here, you can kind of see somewhat in the picture there. We took a field trip per se to every single one of the 100 and whatever streets that we went and drove, and we were looking at how every one of them has an OCI. We wanted to know what was it that was causing the OCI to be what it was. Some of the factors that you can see kind of represented here in the picture. Some localized utility construction. The 2023 pavement assessment could never contemplate some of the localized utility construction that we see out there today, whether it was a water main break, whether it's the franchise utility, whether it's a drainage project. So that degradation factor wasn't part of the plan, and it either it hadn't begun at that point, or it was an emergency response type construction. What was the street in the OCI category that we were even inspecting based on some localized repair that was needed? So a lot of the streets that we drove, I would say the majority of them actually, out of the 108 85 streets or whatever that we inspected weren't qualified or didn't qualify, wouldn't make sense to be reconstruction projects based on some localized repair that was bad enough and large enough that the OCI was significantly decreased by. However, it wouldn't make sense to reconstruct the entire street based on this small portion of the roadway that was where. So those then were removed from the list based on other projects that or maintenance projects that we could actually put those in that would achieve the same results, which is the higher OCI. However, be accomplished either sooner or in a cheaper fashion. So we definitely wanted to make sure that those deficiencies were noted and then transferred into a different maintenance program. And then also what we were taking a look at is you know, the deterioration or the condition of the street. You know, what is it? Was it a surface deterioration or deficiency, or was it a structural deficiency that we need to go in and address with a rehabilitation, reconstruction, whatever methodology kind of project that this committee would be considering? And then sometimes you will drive streets that ride terribly. However, the base and the structural integrity of the street is in perfect condition, so it would definitely just benefit from potentially an overlay. However, the ride quality is so poor that it drags the OCI down into what we would think or depend on, you know, reconstruction candidate. But those are kinds of the things when you rely on the 2023 assessment and the tools that it's given us. We want to make sure that we are utilizing that as a tool in the toolbox, not the tool. So with the physical inspection as well as that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but kind of, you guys.
Sorry, it sounds like you guys did a lot of out there on site looking at it. Is there a quick way that y'all can tell from looking at it whether it's surface or structural, or do you have to do some more testing in order to do that?
So the quick answer there is the type of deficiency that is that you see at the surface will definitely tell you whether it's a structural, subgrade, drainage, moisture. I mean, there's a couple different ways that we would determine, and we were determining that, you know, this is a ride quality thing. However, if you take a quick you know, inspection for you is if you're driving down the street and you see that the grade of the curb line holds steady throughout the street, you know, you can it's not a guarantee, but it's close that, you know, the stability, the structure of the subgrade is intact. And it also tells you that there's probably not a drainage issue there, that, you know, inconsistent moisture content that would cause, you know, heaving or settling. So there's a lot of conditions that we are comfortable with during a drive-by inspection that we'd be able to quickly tell, you know, if there's quite a bit of potholes or there's some allegation that are just evidence of a base failure with moisture penetration. So there's a couple different techniques that we would use, you know, to kind of quickly assess what's going on with each street. And then, of course, ride quality. I think everyone in here probably can tell a lot of ride quality by just driving the street as well. Hope that answers. And then ultimately, with that inspection information, taking it back and, you know, asking Nathan and Ariella to help us input that information into the overall thing, into the overall file and street listing, kind of helping us decide whether it is does it have a candidacy for a reconstruction project. And so that I just.
Bo, is this before, after, or during, you know, the machine that we have that assesses the streets too? What's that called again?
So that was done in 2023 with the pavement assessment.
The
with
pavement
the
assessment,
the
and then
RAS
you
van,
have
yes.
that is part of the process with this as well.
Yes.
Okay, so that's that data that comes off of that machine that went through the streets.
That's
and
the
collected
baseline,
data.
yes.
Okay.
That's a good point. You know, that is definitely where we want to utilize as a tool in the toolbox. You know, AI and machine learning and all of those laser I forgot how many laser endpoints, we're judging the ride from the International Rideability Index. But it still just can't yet do what a person can as far as investigating and inspecting the roadway, because it can tell you there's a deficiency there. It just can't tell you why. And was it the gas company that came through and they had to make an emergency repair, and so there's a utility cut that is now dragging that OCI down. So those are the kinds of things where putting our eyes on it, in addition to having that tool, makes that a little easier to digest. Okay, so now everyone has that list again. I want to just retouch on a slide, that we used from last time, just titled "Options to Outcomes." And the slide or the spreadsheet that you see on the top left there is what was provided at last meeting. We kind of all agreed that, hey, these are the conditions that we're going to survey. We all agreed that there's a lot of data to enter, and you can see the complex spreadsheet at the bottom that every one of those cells is or has now been completed, and along with our inspection, and that is what's helping us generate that list. So we went over the decision-making index last time, and those are what's compiling those summation of numbers and toward which will end up being on your street listing there, the community index rating. Okay, so now just moving on into our major streets as far as the ranking. If you'll, at the top left, if everyone has their sheet out, top left you have the rank, and those are calculated, like say, based on the index rating that you can see on my slide, far right, highlighted by the square, the light blue square, and that mirrors exactly what it is that you guys have on your sheets. Also, we included in there the streets and the from and to, so that way we know exactly which segments that we're looking at. What classifications are they, and just some data as far as what kind of length we're talking about. Does anyone have any quick questions, discussions on any of the major streets that are in the map or on the list that you see? No pressure. So I'm going to move on to the residential side.
Are you asking questions about how the list or any input as to the streets that are on it?
Well, I just taking a quick look. This is just an excerpt. You have the full list in front of you for the majors. So I just didn't know if there were any questions based on the ranked version of the major streets, and any discussions, because
Well, the only thought I had coming into the meeting was I was curious to see where the remainder of Iron Horse would fall. I'm only commenting on the streets that I know about and where I live. It never did make sense to me. I'm sure somebody could explain it to me why, when Iron Horse was reconstructed, that they didn't finish from Browning to the loop, considering that the sub roadbed in there has really utterly failed. But just on my concern with it being utilized as, several things: the traffic from Walmart and Sam's, the traffic going to the Hills Church, the traffic that's going to be generated by the new neighborhood going in behind Wells Fargo, and then not to mention the thousands of apartments that straddle Iron Horse on the end that needs to be reconstructed, plus the additional several hundred, is my understanding, apartment units that are planned for that hard corner. It just makes sense to me that we would go in and finish the job, especially considering it's so bad.
I don't know if I have, I wasn't part of that previous bond committee, so I wouldn't have the information as to why it wasn't considered. My assumption is that there was quite a bit of construction surrounding that portion or that segment of Iron Horse that was on the horizon, and you know, probably timing wasn't part of that plan at that point anyway.
And more to come.
And there absolutely is more to come. So, and obviously funding limits, play into that as well. I think there's can you look at the ranked, at the street list and the map? Because I think we show Iron Horse, but it's not on the list.
On the list in my hand, we have 41 streets, but there's only 25 on your slide. Is that so it could all fit and be legible?
This is just an excerpt from the this is just an excerpt from the spreadsheet, so absolutely, there's more than 25. It's okay.
It's on there.
Oh,
Hey, we may be getting to this later on, but just take like that first one you have up there with Smithfield, and it says length is 2812, and the community rating is 810. First, is there going to be any way I can tell from that community rating or something on there that that's a rebuild rather than a resurface, or is that going to be later?
so that's a question that I think this committee would be able to make recommendations on. I don't know that we are tonight ready to present.
I'm not asking that. And if there's something we're going to get to later, I'm fine with that.
Absolutely. I think once allocations are spoken of and we get to those topics, we're going to talk about methodology, I think. But we want to get to a ranked position to where before we talk about the methodology, because that's going to lend to how much it's going to cost.
And I'm going to cut out several of my questions because I think you just answered it by saying the methodology is coming later. But I guess part of that methodology will be where we're going to put the major streets, how many major streets we're going to include versus residential, and vice versa, right? Okay, thanks.
So just, to address that. So this is, tonight, we won't be, y'all won't be discussing how many of which streets to do. That will come in March. So this is, tonight we just want to wrap up the street discussion and come to a consensus at least on these rankings. So if you have questions about the scores and, want Nathan to look up kind of on his spreadsheet, he'd be happy to do it. Why something scored a certain way versus something else. What we want to do is proceed with these ranking lists if y'all, the majority of you all are kind of in agreement with it. So then what will happen is at the next meeting, we're going to present one additional facilities project for y'all to look at. And then in February, we'll start talking about money and what the tax rate implications could be on various amounts of debt issuance. And then we'll start, at the first meeting, we'll start talking about ranking projects and an amount of money that you all might be looking at. And then at the second meeting in March, we plan to sort of wrap that up with you all. In between there, we'll be sending out some surveys that this committee can complete so that we can wrap up those recommendations and have that to present to you. So that is a long way, Joe, to answer your question. That yes, that the next stages in the process will be about how much money are we talking? How much do y'all want to go to streets? What of any of these projects do you even want to recommend for the citizens to consider? So that'll be where we go to. We start that discussion in March and wrap up in April.
Sorry, I was going to ask one question about Rumfield to Prince Seek line. I think It's right over there where Mark's new, I drive that quite a bit. It doesn't seem in bad shape. Maybe I'm just missing something. What got that to the top? The part of Rumfield I'm more concerned about is over where, and that's not a road condition, but where it hits Davis. That's terrible. The backup that starts there, and for some reason I do not understand why we have a left-only turn lane. Nobody's ever explained that to me when a right turn is what I think should be there. But whatever, that's not a road condition. That's a kind of a traffic problem. But my original question is, do you know what Rumfield is doing there over on Precinct Line?
That small section between, I guess it was the concrete, that up to Spring Oak is, I think, the question that he's asking about.
That's the residential. He's talking about Rumfield from Spring Oak to Precinct.
Yeah, so from Spring Oak back to the concrete section, right? Towards Precinct Line?
Yeah, 2 precinct.
Yeah, I don't, we can definitely go into the data and see what's driving that factor. Because I can see, what is it, are you looking at item 22? Is that's the one that's driving that community rating factor? We can go into the data and take a look at what's driving that. If that's, a specific question, we can definitely do that. And I mean, I can do that right now, and we can look at it.
It's got to do with traffic volume.
Okay, so it's based on volume. So that's the volume there is what's driving that community rating higher. Yes.
So I got a question. I'm looking at the first map y'all got versus the ones y'all handed out today, including Rumfield. I noticed some differences. Is the driving factor in what's listed, like what's highlighted on these maps, is that just the volume? What factors changed there? Because I thought, unless I missed something, he said we did the 10 analyses and then went with the original because they all. Am I correct there? Like, did the grades change? Is it just the volume look back? Like, what's the difference between the maps?
So what the original map you held up there, I believe that was day one, meeting one in November.
Right.
So what we were looking at there was a very early snapshot in time, streets that were ranked, depending on if that's major or local streets, either less than 60 or less than 40. What it doesn't recognize is that we went through and added all of the data. So we went through and added traffic volume, approaches, all of those planned development, all of that then helped us rank the top, 41 versus 76. So does that help answer? Yeah. Absolutely, okay. And that was going to be my next slide, but you kind of helped me go through it already blindly. So we started in November on the major streets with looking at OCI's streets with OCI less than 60. At that day, there were 110 streets identified, and then the ranked list that you have in front of you tonight has been whittled down to 41 individual street segments.
Forgive me for harping. I'm having a hard time just on, at least on the major streets, and maybe you could just point out to me a few of them. What I would like to know out of this list and is, are any, not so much volume of traffic, but which ones of these roads are in utterly what you would just failed condition? You got to like dodge lanes or you're going to bust a tire. Is there a way to look at that and see these roads are the ones that just, I mean, I don't care if there's 5 people that drive down it a day, you can't do it without breaking a tire.
So, believe it or not, we don't keep track of breaking a tire statistics, but if you look at the OCI on the we don't provide. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is get you to because the community rating will consider all of the factors and the weights, and what you're looking for is an OCI only. list. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm looking for something like which ones are really the worst condition roads.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just based on what both started with, saying that we're going to be able to email out the pavement assessment that is going to provide that raw OCI data. So you can take a look in that by street. I don't know if it is alphabetical. We can, if we want to, provide you a version that's alphabetical by street and then a version that is listed like high to low on OCI, we can do that with the caveat that, to his point earlier, where they took these streets and they went out and took a look and they realized that in some cases 80% of the street was in great shape and 20% of it had an issue that was dragging the rest of the street down. So you have to take that into account when you're looking at those low OCI streets. It may not be representative of a full street failure. It's certainly a good indicator that there's a problem, though.
That's a good point. We were planning to send the street list out, or it's been sent out alphabetical only. So it may be a good idea to filter it for the worst OCI. So that way, it's a little harder to once you get past the first 2 or 3 pages, it's hard to understand that, but you can definitely see from an alphabetical standpoint how easy it is to get to the street you're looking for. So we'll definitely make sure that is available.
But so this gives me an opportunity again to talk about the life cycle of a street, which is my favorite slide and thing to talk about. So I'm glad to have that opportunity. But it just a reminder that so the streets on this list are the ones with the lowest ice below 60. So that means they're candidates for total street reconstruction. And we kind of addressed that at the beginning of the streets discussion. But as we mentioned, there are other programs that we do preventive maintenance on other streets that aren't quite to that condition level of needing a complete reconstruction, but need some intensive preventive maintenance, such as an overlay or something like that. So these streets are streets that are 60 or below on the major. So they're in pretty bad shape. But yeah, it would be the lower OCI rating would be the worst. And also remember, right, am I saying that right, Bo?
Yes.
He looked at me weird. Also remember that the street pavement assessment that we did, it doesn't just look at surface. The good thing about the new technology is it's also looking at subsurface. So what does that mean? It means you could drive a road and it could seem okay, but it's got a very low OCI, and it's because that radar detected something below the surface that's going to cause a failure. So that also plays into it. So sometimes it's not always just what you can see and how it feels when you drive. It's what's going on below the surface. So
what you're saying, to clarify, is that it could be a good street So it could be a good street, low OCI rating. There might be one location that blows a tire, and preventative street maintenance goes out, repairs that one issue, and that's why it never makes this list. However, these on the list as a street as a whole are an issue. It's not just one location.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Bo, this is just working down the road when we start to kind of figure this thing out. Is there any way, and it should be fairly simple, to kind of identify some of these roads that have an important role in our community? For example, Booth Callaway. It might not rank as high as some of these other ones, but you got a hospital there, you got a lot of things like that. So I think it's important for us to keep in mind too, that some of these roads serve some things that are essential to this community that we probably need to bump up, or at least keep in mind. I don't want you guys to redo anything, because I don't understand what you're doing anyway. But I don't want you to redo anything. But it would be important to make some notes maybe off the side. Hey, we got a fire department here. We got a fire station here. We got schools here. We got a hospital here. Those are important things for this committee to kind of keep in mind as we look at that. It's going to bump some of the stuff up, at least in my mind.
Absolutely. And we have a little bit of that, and I'm going to let the engineer speak on how that's factored into the list you're seeing today.
And so we actually did take that into account. What you're seeing here is just basically the final product. There's obviously a lot of data that goes into it. This bottom spreadsheet right here is, although for residential, we have a very similar one for majors that takes into account network importance, regional access, police and fire, their routes to how they like to do things. So all of those factors were incorporated. You just happen to only see the final product here that takes that into account.
If there are speed bumps, like you've got Emerald Hills, and I think Emerald Hills is full of speed bumps, are you going to put those back?
Probably yes, because they were already installed. I don't know if we have a policy to then take them out. So my guess is yes, we would go back with them.
I think since some of them were put in, I think, as I understand, there's been some reconsideration of when they're needed and how they're constructed and things like that. I would assume if we're going to do that, we would maybe look at it again under new microscope.
I think in the case of Emerald Hills, I think we certainly would, because it's a collector roadway. And we, if we were to go back in time, those were put in at a time, if I remember correctly, in the late 90s, when it was kind of, we had a speed hump policy, and hey, this is what you need to do to get speed humps. And the shift has definitely occurred where, we've realized that they're not an end-all be-all solution. But I can say on the 2020 bond, we had one, if not two, residential streets that had speed humps that were included. We did go back and put those in afterwards. We didn't do it immediately. The outcry was significant. But those are residential, not those collectors. In the case of Emerald Hills in particular, we would certainly take another look at counts, look at speed data. We would think twice before adding them, certainly.
Keep knocking it off. Things are so big. Thank you.
Sorry.
One of the things that came at our last meeting, Welborn was asking, I forgot his first name now, look at the different, methodologies. And you did that, which is great, a lot of work into that. So we're really coming down, is the methodology how we want to go forward to agree to the rankings. Now, you can move one street here, one street there, whatever, but I think the main focus that I'm looking for tonight is you did what we asked. The numbers came out almost exactly the same for as priorities in ranking. So the shifting will come later, because what's going to shift us really is how much money can we spend. There's 41 on this one list of major streets. They're all needed. But we only know we can't do all 41 streets. One, several things are prohibiting. One, how much money we can borrow as citizens and taxpayers. Number two is, how much work can really be done in a 3 to 5 year period? There's only so many contractors out there to go work on 41 projects all at once. I just wish for a little while 820 wasn't under construction, And we all wish that there were some areas would finally, let us use what we got and kind of hold off. So you got to kind of space some of that out. But tonight, I think I'm hearing is, let's agree upon the methodology. And here's the ranking system, based on all those things we asked them to do. Now, let's get to the meat and potatoes as we start talking about dollars and things down the line. How many can be the major collectors? How much can we put in residential streets that we see as the big priority list? Don't forget, fire stuff, library we've already visited, all those kind of things go along. That'll impact our total dollars of what we can do. So I'm ready. I agree with the methodology. They did the changes, or not changes. You did the different factors that you moved around, and they still came out the same. So we can shift them back and forth, but it'll be really how much dollars can we, as a whole, can we spend? What's going to determine how much will get done in this potential bond issue.
So we pulled up this slide just as a reminder. This is what went into what you're seeing on your ranking sheet as, what do you call it, the community index. That's total score. These are all the components of that total score that we talked about at the last meeting. And so in between time, staff went in and scored those streets, and what you've got on your list is the final community index ranking based on these factors. And so what we can also do is send out the spreadsheet, the scoring spreadsheet, so that you can each have some time before the next meeting to kind of look at it and see where staff saw the scores, and if you have any disagreements or anything. But we might also send out at least the sensitivity model. I don't know about the full thing. We can. We're not trying to hide anything. It's just that's a lot of information. But or maybe just you'll get the slides and it'll show what the standard deviations were from those sensitivity models when we made one of these factors rate higher or lower. Did it really change the ranking that much? You know, the OCI is what's going to drive it primarily because it's so heavily weighted. But the other things do play in, like the network importance. That's the amount of traffic that's on it. Those kinds of things. So we'll send out the final scoring sheet so that you can look at it if you have questions. And feel free, as you look at that, if you have questions, contact Nathan, and he can try to answer them, or y'all can discuss through, why we saw something as a 7 versus a 5, or whatever the case may be. And then we can kind of reach consensus on these rankings at the beginning of the next meeting. The reason that's important to kind of reach consensus on the rankings doesn't mean it might not change in the future as y'all decide amounts and priorities and things like that, but it's because from here the public works staff will try to come up with realistic probable cause estimates for these street sections so that we can have a realistic total for you when we start to talk about the total amount of money that we're talking about. Right now, they're just going off, what we know is the average cost per linear foot of street reconstruction, but a lot of other factors play into that when you start talking about a specific street section. So, and I'm talking way above at least my degree grade. I'm not an engineer, and I don't even play one on TV. I sometimes play one at work, but don't tell anybody. Anyways, so if that'll be helpful to address, some of these questions and kind of remind, okay, this was how you come up with that index, and these are the scores, and anything you look at and say, why would this be higher or lower on the list? You can kind of go back to that spreadsheet and see where it's scored in the other factors besides OCI.
This may have been answered before, but say this all goes to bond, and we have X number of dollars going to the streets. How do we decide what money goes first? Are we fishtailing the residential to the major streets? Are we just going according to the community rating, whether it's a major street or a residential street, or do we even know that yet?
So that'll be part of our discussions that we get into in March, probably more that second meeting in March. Last time, it was all streets, but the committee did sort of decide a spread of money for majors and money for residentials, and that kind of dictated the number because it was based on the total amount. This time, though, you're going to be thinking about the amount of money that you'd be comfortable with proposing to the voters, or to the council to propose to the voters, based on what the tax rate implications might be, and then you'll be looking at that money and saying, okay, for this money, do we want to do streets and some of these facility projects? Do we want to do all of it? Do we want to put a certain amount towards, and then, so you'll be breaking it down. Those meetings will probably be longer than we've had, and a lot of discussion, I'm hoping, because that'll be where this group is kind of deciding what. In the meantime, too, when we send out that survey, what we want you to do is talk to your family, your neighbors, about their thoughts about the projects and what you've seen and the amount of money and things like that, so that you can kind of start to get a feel. Because we're going to be talking about a significant sum of money. So I don't know. I can tell you what I think the total is going to be, but I couldn't even begin to tell you what I think the tax rate implications could possibly be, and that's what our finance team will be working on in preparation for your March, or I'm saying March, but I mean February, don't I? I'm a month ahead of myself in my head. I'm sorry, y'all.
With your specific question, so, understanding now streets is part of a larger bond consideration, and in 2020 it was just streets. But once we had that dollar amount, it was decided it was going to be a 75-25 split. And so we just worked down those lists. With the 75%, it was roughly $37 million that was allocated to majors. We worked down the majors list. And with the 13 to 14 million that was for the residential, we worked on the ranked residential list. So they were separate. They weren't dovetailed in. They each had their own allocations. Yes, based on funding.
So in the future, we'll be getting engineer's estimate along with these streets, rough and dirty.
Not engineered. We're not fully engineered. Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm asking loaded questions, but the one that I've got in my mind is I've been hearing a lot of comments, albeit I don't know how qualified the comments are, about the capacity of the larger community of construction companies to handle construction projects. I know I personally have several friends, acquaintances that are either own or are employed by these civil construction firms. I think they would argue that they have lots of capacity to be able to handle these. What is coming up with this perception, at least, and do you have a way of somehow quantifying what capacity is really the maximum amount of street projects that we could entail at once, both in terms of capacity of construction company and of dollars?
Capacity is going to be how cheap they give us a bid.
No,
That'll tell us one factor.
Well, and I think if I understand, of course, we see the construction that's going on out there at 820. And by the way, it's supposed to be done in 2027, just so you know. Right. So, I mean, are there in DFW, there are all kinds of contractors. That's not going to be as much the limiting factor as it is the city's ability to manage those projects. We don't just turnkey them over. So, in the case where money's absolutely no object, we grow the staff and we just take on all kinds of things. But, given what we have as a staff now, we've got Nathan, he's got 2 engineer associates, we've got 4 construction inspectors, we've got other things going on. The projects that we had through the 2020 bond, we were annually managing. We'd have, 2 projects in design, 2 or 3 under construction on the major side. Ops would be managing, 3 to 5 residential projects. And in addition to that, we have preventive street maintenance, we have other duties, development projects and so forth. So that has been the limiting factor.
But is 50 million too much? Is 75 million too much? Are we saying no, it's about 50 million, that's our max?
Well, and that doesn't have anything to do with as far as the capacity of for the work. That really has to do with the workload of the contractors and or city staff. But when you're talking about the capacity of the money, really that is where we are asking your opinions and your support in that, because this will be presenting to you at those meetings. I think it's March. About February or March. About that. So we'll show you, okay, this amount of money issued in bonds is going to could result, it doesn't mean it's going to, but it could result in this much increase in your tax rate to pay that debt. And so the question for you all is what do you think the voters could support, and do you think the projects are important enough that they would support a tax rate increase in order to fund the projects? That's where the 50 million, and then the other thing is we really still couldn't do all the projects at once, because it has to do, we phase out the issuance of that debt in order to be able to pay the payments. And also because if we issue it too early and the work isn't getting done fast enough, I'm going to say it, we face something called arbitrage, which is basically a penalty, and we have to pay back the money because we're not spending it fast enough. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to get into those discussions with you at the end of February, beginning of March, so you understand how that works and why that's important. But yeah.
Get a feel for how much load.
Yeah. Yeah.
50 million and all of them are 2 different things.
Okay. Yeah.
How much between 50 and, let's say, the low end and everything what do you have a feel for how much is too much? That's what I'm really trying to gauge as a citizen is if we wanted to push the needle, how far can we go and actually get more streets done?
I don't want to speak out of turn from a financial standpoint, so Paulette, stop me whenever.
No,
I
it's
get
more load that I'm asking about.
Yeah, absolutely, but so if you say 50 million, but you know the schedule looks like a very condensed 4-year project or something like that, that you know what I'm really asking, or what I hear you saying is a total amount, right? That yields how much street work is being done. However, if you take that amount and then divide it by years, you know, then we can kind of stretch those projects out and gain some capacity with staff and/or contractors. I think the other question I think I hear you asking is, do we have some sort of feel for the marketplace and how it is that these contractors are bidding right now, and how many of them? And I think I think North Richland Boulevard and Harmonson were the last two that we had on the market for public bids, and we received probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 a piece. It wasn't as if we had 20 or 30 contractors knocking at the door ready to build these streets. However, we still, I mean, there was a couple of them that bid on it. So I still think there's some capacity out on the streets for these contractors to work on, and I think there's probably committee members here that could speak a little bit to that as well. But does that help get you? Because I think there's a total amount of money, and then there's also a timeline that we have to consider based on the number of staff that Caroline mentioned, as well as the contractors that are bidding on it.
Any other questions?
How many projects can we handle in a year?
Well, it depends, because they're not all the same projects. So, I mean, when you're talking about reconstruction of a street, that's a completely different thing than what we handle most of in-house. Also, if you're talking about reconstruction of a major street versus a residential street, those are different projects. And then if you're talking about preventive street maintenance, we handle some of that in-house with our own staff, but we contract out a lot because, for example, this past year we had $6 million in preventive street maintenance projects that we needed to spend and get done, and so we contracted out a lot of that work. We did some of it ourselves, but a lot was contracted out. So, and I don't remember how many streets are in that $6 million. 78. So, but also those are going to be smaller sections, and they're not going to be closed for as long, because that's the other thing you have to ask yourself. It's not just about how much work we can handle, it's about how many street closures can the citizens tolerate. And I mean, those of you that Glenview was closed for a long time, and along with several other major streets at the same time, and people were not very tolerant of it, although they're glad now that it's open. But yeah.
So it's basically a different variation of the same question, but ignoring for a second, the community factor of like street closures, is there a ballpark estimate of how much staff we have to manage projects at a given time? Like, assuming minimum number of staff required per project, how many projects could we have at one time? Is, I think, the way I want to word that. And then, obviously, we have to account for the other factors, but I'm just curious, that one first.
I think I'm going to try to answer your question, because I don't think we don't have a metric that answers that specific question. But I think I want everyone to understand that the staff doesn't change. I mean, there were some vacancies here and there, but other than that, we don't gain, or it doesn't increase or decrease. However, the bond, the 2020 bond project, for instance, is one piece of the capital project pie that we're working with. So there's utility projects, there are drainage projects, there are the other street projects, preventative street maintenance, and the staff number that manages them. I think, Ariella, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're over somewhere around the 100 projects that the same staff is managing, the same staff that's putting all of this data together, and the same staff that would be managing it going into the field, which should streets be selected as part of the allocated 2026 bond project. Does that help? I mean, I think you got to take it in consideration
I
as a
just think
whole.
like that kind of idea of how many projects the city can handle at a given time is kind of narrowing in what all these questions are.
And to Nathan and Caroline, they both, you know, 2 majors a year is kind of what they were kind of planning to design, and then have one, you know, 2 also in construction at the same time. So that way, we were just really trying to turnkey them. I can tell you that's an aggressive and you know, lofty goal to keep those balls juggling for the entire project. And then that doesn't even consider the operations folks that were managing the other 19 or whatever residential streets. So it was quite aggressive. I'm happy to say that, you know, we're on schedule and making it happen, but that's something that we definitely need to consider when we start talking about the number of projects and how long we're kind of anticipating the schedule. And I think that's, again, out of my league is talking about the finances, but that's dictated by the debt, and we got to be intelligent about how we do that part.
Okay, so just for reference point, this might help. I don't know, Paulette or Caroline, Bo, the 2020 bond election that we had was for 7 years. Is that right?
We said,
We set a time limit of 7 years. And in that 7 years, from the beginning to when the 7 years ends, which is in 2027, right? How many I don't remember how many streets we approved. We approved.
It was 27
20
total streets.
27 total
Right.
streets. That might give you some reference point there of how many streets during the life of the bond, from the beginning to the end, that we could do and complete. And of course,
And the last streets just went to bid.
and the last
right?
last streets
Or
just went to
about
bid.
to. Chapman's in design, and that's the last
That
one.
makes my husband
Yeah.
very happy.
Yeah.
So over that 7 year period, we're accomplishing 27 streets of various lengths and and that all needed reconstruction, not just an overlay, not something just to fix and maintain, but complete reconstruction. With the longest one being Glenview, taking the longest time. Does that help give a reference point?
I think also part of what might help, I've seen an image in like some of the work sessions and stuff of the timeline of the various projects. It had like the bars with the overlapping. Is there any chance we could get like if there exists one, like a start to finish of that for the previous bond project as a reference?
Yeah, so that's actually available on the city's website, but we can provide it. And we're also going to go through those examples for you when we start to talk about the allocation of the projects and the timing and everything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Good questions.
Yes.
And we'll try to have a little bit more definitive answer. I think that the example Susie gave from the last 27 streets in 5 to 7 years, we've been able to get that done. We're gonna come in just by a hair, but we're able to get it done, and that was an aggressive time frame. So that's a good example, but we can work to see if we can come up with some kind of a better, more definitive number for these projects.
From a capacity standpoint.
Right.
So there were some questions before we ventured off into the capacity conversation about the community index, and just wanted to bring this slide up from the previous meeting, just so that way everyone understood kind of how the math worked and how we were able to come up with the community index rating there. And as Paulette mentioned, we'll send out the full major and local spreadsheets, so that way everyone has the ability to take a look at the in-depth detail and data that's associated with each one of those streets, and how that math and the numbers that build those community index ratings. So. Let's see.
Should we announce that date that they're changing that one meeting?
I've got it. I'll do it.
Give me back into the presentation here. So I started off by discussing the majors. The residential streets are exactly the same as far as the information that's in front of you with the mapping as well as the ranked. I think there are 76 total. And again, we started with 254 individual streets, and the ranked list that you see in front of you has 76. So there's quite a bit of inspection and data-driven information that led to those streets not being candidates based on kind of the conversations that we've had today that ended up on the local street listing there. With that, we've kind of had a lot of questions, a lot of discussion. I don't know if if we have any other questions, or just want to. Paulette mentioned that we may hold off getting kind of a consensus on the rankings until next time. If we want to hold on to that, happy to wait until the 20th. However, open to any discussion or questions about it.
Any questions for staff? Mark?
I don't know if we should be saying thank you, even though he enjoyed it, but thanks to Nathan for playing with Excel and trying to check out different variations of it.
Make sure we tell Justin we did.
Yeah, for sure. He didn't show up today.
Yeah, he had to take advantage of the time before his new baby's born,
Yes.
so. Okay.
Not like he was moving anything.
Any other questions?
No.
And just for the committee's sake, of the next three meetings, which is January 20th, February 3rd, and February 17th, the location of those meetings had to be changed for various reasons. And we're going to the Public Works Service Center on Dick Lewis, okay? And you'll get your email from Christie on that change. And then, are the February meetings?
Yes, so the February
Same
the
location?
same.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next three meetings will be at this location. Also, the March 10th meeting had to be moved from March 10th to March the 4th because of staff conflicts and some committee members' conflicts. The location of that meeting will be announced, is to be announced. So we still have some time. So don't forget that next three meetings will be at this new location, the Public Works Service Center, 7200A, Dick Fisher Drive South. Everybody familiar with the location? Right off Mid-Cities by the Bechtel and the fire station there. Okay?
We'll have the gates open, and you can see parking there, well, parking in the yellow area, and the meeting location is in the kind of the trapezoidal red building at the southern portion of the property there.
Okay. Any questions about the meeting changes, location changes, or the March 10th meeting change? Okay, so don't forget, March 10th meeting has been changed to March the 4th. Okay? Okay, any other questions, discussion items for staff? Any clarifications? The only thing that I will ask is that if staff, and I'm sure you're going to do this anyway, if you get a question from a member, will you share the response with the whole group? So that in case somebody else has the same question. Thank you all.
Good idea.
Okay, next we'll move on to public comments. An opportunity for citizens to address the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee on matters which are scheduled on this agenda for consideration by the committee, but not scheduled as a public hearing. In order to address the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee, during public comments, a public meeting appearance card must be completed and presented to the recording secretary prior to the start of the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee meeting. Do we have any cards?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have received one request to speak. The speaker is Mr. Jim Morgan. Please approach the podium. Mr. Morgan, and state your name and address.
Actually, Ray, if he can just take your mic and come up
Yeah,
here if he wants.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Sure.
Three
You
minutes.
have 3 minutes to address the committee. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm not a public speaker, so I appreciate your patience. My name's Jim Morgan, and I'm a 32-plus year resident of the city of North Richland Hills. the last 12 years of which I've resided at 7601 Frankie B. Street, a wonderful neighborhood in North Texas. I'm joined tonight by 7 of the fellow residents of Frankie B. that are in attendance. Would you please raise your hand or stand up, please? Thank you very much. The reason why we're here, and we may be misdirected to your committee by accident, but in November and December of this past year, we were suggested to attend the meeting tonight in an opportunity to request renovations to Frankie B. Street. We understand now that this is a bond project and there might be other avenues, but we wanted to explain our presence and our participation tonight. Frankie B. Street is a wonderful 3-block long street in North Richland Hills off Hewitt. The citizens of Frankie B. Street circulated a request, which I present to you all tonight. We, the undersigned residents of Frankie B. Street, request that any and all appropriate committee and staff of the city of North Richland Hills consider and contemplate renovation of the roadway. The road surface is rough, crumbling, riddled with potholes and utility line repairs aggravated by truck traffic and involved in the construction of new homes at the west side of the street. No more lots are remaining. The photographs taken in December 4th, are being provided as supporting document to this request. There are 34 residents of Frankie B. Street that have signed this petition asking your request to facilitate road repairs. There are 14 pages of colored photographs of potholes, seams, broken pavement, holes in the road, utility line cuts that haven't been repaired other than occasional pothole fixing every few months. For the last 12 years, there's been no overlay that I've experienced since I've lived there. I know that there are some residents in the room that have lived there 18 years, and it's only been renovated one time with the slurry mix during that time. It's a wonderful street. We're proud of our neighborhood. At Thanksgiving time, many of us were embarrassed by our guests traveling down, hitting the potholes, asking why a beautiful neighborhood like this has such rotten streets. And I think the pothole crews are great in being responsive to our requests when we call them, but we need to do something about a proactive repair for a long-term purpose rather than just putting a Band-Aid on the problems that are there. We appreciate it very much, and we appreciate very much your time and your patience, and we encourage the city to spend the money that the taxpayers have on the basic utilities that we need to be provided to citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Okay, no applause, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, and your fellow residents. Did you make a copy of that presentation?
That is for you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll make sure that staff gets this, and thank you for taking the time to come. Any other questions, comments? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.